Shalom, everyone. This is Rabbi Alan Levine, and we are back here online to talk about the Torah portions and connecting them with Messiah Yeshua. Today, I'm wearing my Royal Caribbean hat, I guess in memory of the cruises that are not happening probably for months and months. So here's to you, Royal Caribbean, and to all the other cruise lines, and to hope that you are back very soon. Okay, now that I got that out of the way, let's talk about our Torah portion this morning. So this week's portion is Emor. Emor is speak. And it's basically Leviticus chapters 21 through 23. And it is, it has a few things in there. One of the things that I would like to speak about this morning, and that is about Shabbat. And here's why. Within this portion, God speaks to Moses and tells Moses to speak to the priests. And God sort of reiterates or goes through very briefly Shabbat and the 7 feasts that Israel are to follow. And it's interesting because Shabbat is mentioned before the 7 feasts. So although the 7 feasts are very important to us, we need to realize that there's probably a very special importance to all of us about Shabbat because it's mentioned before the 7 feasts. And so this morning I want to talk about Shabbat and how it relates to, one of the ways that it relates to us as the body of Messiah. And so there is this link of the Shabbat in Bereshit, in the book of Genesis, right away in the Torah, talking about the Sabbath, the 7th day of rest. And so there is this link between Shabbat in Bereshit and the spiritual rest of Shabbat, and it's talked about all throughout the New Testament, the Brit Hadashah, but I want to key in on something that's talked about in the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. Now, I know most of you have heard this before, but I just want to remind everyone that the book of Hebrews, although it's called the book of Hebrews, we have to understand this was a book that was written to the Jewish believers in the first century. And so really, it shouldn't be called the book of Hebrews. It should really be called the book of Jewish believers. And so we have this connection of the physical Shabbat in the Torah, and we have the fulfillment of Shabbat, the spiritual rest through Messiah. And so in creation that we read about in Genesis, God tells us that God created all things in 6 days. And on the 7th day, he rested. And it wasn't that God was tired, but the creation process had finished. And so now that all had been finished, he now allowed all of the things that he created to start moving and working. And so he rested from his 6 days of creation. And so, although God did give the Sabbath, the Shabbat, to man, we need to understand that God gave himself a Shabbat during the creation process. And so for us, we realize that we are to have 6 days of labor. And as a matter of fact, when God first spoke about the Shabbat, he said, you are to have 6 days of labor, and then the seventh day will be a day of rest. And so it was the same pattern that he had for creation. And so for us, before accepting Messiah Yeshua, we go through this creative process, so to speak, of trying to do good things, of trying to be good people, of trying to earn the approval of God and other people, of trying to be right with God. And so we spend these 7 days, so to speak, to do these things, these processes, these creative things that we do for ourselves. And then when we accept Yeshua, we enter into his rest. And so you can see that spiritually, we have 6 days of sort of creation of things that we do in our lives. And then on the seventh day, when we meet Yeshua, we enter into his rest. And then he gives us a rest from having to worry about whether or not we're good enough, whether or not we can do enough good works, whether or not we can be accepted by God, and he will approve the things that we do. And the reality is, we can never earn salvation through our works. And so it's not our efforts and it's not our works, but it's simply resting in what Messiah Yeshua did for us. After all, Yeshua paid the price for us. He accomplished atonement for us. He reconciled us with God. Again, it's not anything that we did during those figuratively 6 days during our life, but it's what we did coming to Messiah Yeshua that gives us that special spiritual rest and reconciles us with God. And so this is really, God gives us through his word and through his prophets and through the disciples and through the apostles and even through people today that like to speak to you about what God's word says. This is an invitation for people to enter into God's rest. And the only way that we can do that is through his son, Messiah Yeshua. And so it's an invitation for all of you to enter into his rest. So that's it for this week. This is Rabbi Allen reminding you that we're on Facebook every week, just about every week, that I'm on YouTube. My channel is Rabbi on the Fly. And so if you're watching Facebook, please share it with friends. Please like it. If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to us and like the YouTube. And so until next week, hopefully, Shalom.